This is Dateline News and Conversations. Tonight's show is going to be quite a bit different from what I've been doing in the past. I've had this experience and this feeling lately, a feeling of anxiety and nervousness and even fear that things are not right in the world, things are not right in the United States, and things are not right close to where I am, a war zone in Ukraine. And like many of you, I've been consumed and overloaded listening to so many different opinions and analysis about what's going on in this war in Ukraine. And every day I read that the United States and the UK are sending more deadly and long range missiles to Ukraine, depleted uranium, apparently crossing Russia's red lines and Russia not responding quickly or even visibly. And so this has been causing a great deal of anxiety. And I've got friends around the world who have expressed to me and to each other a feeling of alienation, of being alone, and the same feeling of anxiety and being unsettled about what they see happening in the world. And so tonight, this is going to be a different kind of show. My guest is my good friend. He's been on the show several times before. He's a gifted writer, a very spiritual person. And he wrote an article today that really resonated with me, given how I've been feeling. My guest is Ed Curtin. Ed, welcome back to the show.
Oh, thank you, Regis. It's always great to be here.
Well, I thank you. You wrote your latest piece and sent it to me today. And you talked about the experience you had yesterday morning, I believe, of walking with your wife into the woods and to a lake that's not very far from your home. And I'd like you to, if you could, just briefly repeat the sensations that you had, the emotions that you felt when you were on this walk this morning.
Sure. Well, let me see if I can repeat it. That's very hard to do. We generally take a walk every day, a long walk up by this lake. And on this day, the weather was supremely beautiful, warm, but not hot. The sun was shining. There was a little breeze. The sky was blue as could be. And when we got to the, we were both feeling great just being outdoors, and the smell of flowers and blossoming trees everywhere around us. And we have a bird feeder outside our kitchen window, and the birds were there and singing from an early hour. And a robin is building a nest in the bush there, where two robins are. It's hard to tell if they're two or one. And as we approach the edge of the lake, up the hill, it's up a hill and overlooks the town, and there's a railroad track down below. But you can't see the tracks from up there. It was just exquisitely beautiful. And right on the edge of the lake, we stopped, where there was not a soul around except for the two of us. And we were standing there, and the water was lapping on the shore. And it was just such a peaceful sound. And suddenly above our heads, two gorgeous Baltimore Orioles, the black and orange birds, were playing in the air above our heads, and they had their claws interlocked and were actually wrestling in the air above our heads, and it was amazing sight to see. And then they stopped right above our head to the left, on a branch within the leaves of a tree, and started singing. And I was overcome with this feeling of joy and happiness to be alive on this beautiful day. It was just an amazing gift I felt that we were being given. And it reminded me of other early morning walks. I'm a big walker. I love the early morning. I get up very early. And that I've had in my lifetime when I was young, throughout my life, and the feeling of exhilaration that I always have when I'm out walking. And this has happened in cities and in the country. I grew up in New York City, and I can recall many times walking by myself, usually in those days, and having that feeling of joy. And sometimes I would be caught in a storm, a rainstorm. I remember one day when I was in graduate school, I walked to the school. It was a few miles away, and I had to walk along a parkway it was called, and beautiful trees and so forth. And when I was coming home, I got caught in a storm that was the most torrential rainstorm I've ever been in. And I was completely drenched. And I loved it. And I felt as if I was being baptized into this world of beauty and joy. And the rain came down so hard, the street, everything was flooded up to my ankles, and I just exulted in it. And so it was that feeling that I had, and I think my wife, I know she had it too, both of us. So that's more or less the experience. And I was flooded with associations, things that came to me. It didn't happen exactly when we were there by the birds, but just shortly thereafter, all these thoughts came to me. Poetry, William Butler Yeats, The Lake of Innisfree, which is a famous little poem of his, and a song by the Irish writer Van Morrison. The title, I forget at the moment. Oh, the Beauty of the Days Gone By, which I linked to at the end of the article. And that song is almost the replica of the experience we had, because it's about taking a walk on a beautiful spring morning by a lake above the town and the railroad tracks, and meditating. Van Morrison says, meditating on my own true self. And it's a beautiful song. And, he's a wonderful singer. So there were all these associations that this triggered in my mind.
I'm going to read something from the article that you wrote, and I think it kind of captures what you were trying to say. And this is it, and I quote, "I learned early on that the music of verse, the sound of birds in the trees, the rush of a creek murmuring over rocks, the lilt of words spoken passionately, the placement of a certain blue paint on a canvas, a singer's voice flying with a tune of joy or sadness, and an instrument's vibrations were all connected to the reverence I felt as an altar boy, tolling the bells and repeating Latin responses whose full meaning I couldn't grasp amid the incense and candle smoke. Et introibo ad altari Dei, ad Deum qui laetificat juventutum mea. And I go to the altar of God, to God who gives joy to my youth. It was the sound of the bells that entranced me, and that I was allowed to ring them, to sound in, to participate in the ancient ritual that created a musical enclave from the beyond. I knew then, as I know now, that God has many altars, and that reverence before them and their mysteries is the right refrain. And then you added Bob Dylan singing Ring Those Bells. And here's what he sang: Ring them bells, ye heathen, from the city that dreams. Ring them bells from the sanctuaries, cross the valleys and streams, for they're deep and they're wide, and the world's on its side, and time is running backwards, and so is the bride. Ed, powerful piece of writing is everything you do. Um, I want you now to comment on what we've talked about before. It was your background in liberal arts. It was your background in religion that gifted you with these feelings, these emotions, and the ability to capture them in your writings. Tell me a little bit about that experience and how it has helped you to step back and get out of the confusion and the noise and the chaos that we experience every day all around us.
Well, when well, obviously, when I was young, I was an altar boy, and I tried to, in this essay, capture a feeling that I had when I did ring those bells during the mass, the Catholic mass. That whole experience is not just great feelings. It's a mixed experience that I had in those days. But those Latin words I've never forgotten. And there are a lot more that I had to memorize and use. And I was lucky, I think. My mother loved poetry. My father was an eloquent writer. The schools I went to encouraged the love of poetry, literature, music, art. My mother was also a painter. A few of my sisters are artists, very good artists. A nephew is an excellent, well-known artist. And so I grew up with this love for the arts and for nature. But when I was in high school, I went to a very rigorous Jesuit high school. And before I left, they gave us these tests. I don't know what they were called. What kind of work you should go into in life. And I took the test like all my friends, and it said I should be a forest ranger, so which I never became, but it was quite telling because nature and being out in nature has meant so much to me my whole life. So if you read closely and love poetry and music, you know how important it all is and how there's a deep spiritual dimension to the arts. And so every day I read poetry, every day I read some literature. And even though I write a lot of political stuff, I essentially consider myself an, an artist uh, at the core. And so I try to make everything I write uh, artistic, because I think that's what people hunger and thirst for, not just facts and analyses of political events, which can overwhelm people. Uh, as you said at the beginning, I think a lot of people that I know, people that I observe, are quite overwhelmed by the condition of the world today, and they have a hunger for artistic and spiritual sustenance. You're in Crimea, and of course, you know the history of Russian literature and Russian poetry, and it is poetry, really, number one, that has sustained people down through the decades, and wherever you look, all over the world. The U.S. is in a sad condition in terms of schooling now, because students don't learn the great poets and what they have to say and how important they are to our inner lives, and not just our inner lives, the lives of resistance to oppression as well. But throughout the world, in other countries, Russia, Chile, you name it, Spain, people memorize and know the great poets of their countries. And it's a little sad here in the U.S. where that's not the case.
Well, I'm going to touch on a couple of things. You talked about capturing past feelings and experiences that were good and positive, inspiring, uplifting, etc. And I have found that when I get into a meditative state, and for many years I was an avid jogger, and I would get up early every morning, and I would run 5 miles maybe, and in that experience, my mind cleared. Uh, I've had the same experience now sitting by the sea here in Yalta, where the air is fresh, the sea is beautiful, there's not much noise, the birds are flying about, and I get into that same kind of state where uh, my mind just becomes almost vacant. And then sometimes out of nowhere comes some of these thoughts, these experiences. It's been happening to me, um, before falling asleep at night, that these positive things come back. And you express that so well in this article. And I think what we're talking about, and I had a show last night, and I haven't posted it yet, with my American friend living in Thailand. He's a Buddhist. And it's what he's all about. It's getting rid of the outside noise and problems and chaos, and looking inward, and not necessarily trying to solve problems or find answers, but just turning inward and finding peace and answers there to who we are. I mean, what would be your thoughts on that, Ed?
Well, I've had similar experiences. I'm a lifelong runner as well as a walker. And the way you describe it, I've been on runs in the past where I kind of just, something happened and I was gone. I was running, but I wasn't really there exactly. Um, they have different terms for it, but so I think movement, exercise is. It's also happened to me. This probably might sound funny to some of your listeners, but I've also been playing basketball my whole life, and through high school and college, and This was a huge part of my life, basketball, and right up till the current times. And when I play basketball, play pure play, the rest of my thoughts, everything disappears. It's completely gone, and all I'm doing is playing. And this is that meditative state that you're talking about. And I think it occurs with artists of various sorts. I know when I'm writing, sometimes I'm just really gone. I don't know where I am, and I'm just, the time goes away, everything goes away, and it's like I'm in the present moment totally, just flowing along, and even when I'm thinking, when I'm writing, I'm kind of not thinking. Words come to me, and I don't. It's easy. It all flows, and so I think people need to seek out those ways of being calm and enjoying life, and not thinking on all the hard stuff all the time. It doesn't do any good for anyone to do that. And in any case, to enjoy yourself, even for an hour or whatever, isn't that one of the points of being alive? What are we here for if we don't love life and enjoy it? Which doesn't mean that we forget about the problems, the suffering, the wars, and all of that. But there's a time for this and a time for that, as the old biblical saying has it. A time for war and a time for peace, and a time for love and a time for hate. So yeah, that's kind of my story. Most of the things I've ever written in my life, I've written while I was outside, not sitting down, not reading a book, not screwing my head on tight, out walking. And the words come to me, or running. No, not usually running, walking. Running, I don't get ideas like that. Words don't come to me. It's a little different. But walking, I think I've written almost everything that I've ever written. Not indoors, and not as I said, screwing on my head tight, but relaxing and letting it come to me.
You mentioned something else. You mentioned so many things I'm going to follow up on, but you mentioned you played basketball your entire life. You went to a Division I college and played basketball. You continue to play it. I had a very similar experience. I was very competitive, and there was a good side to that and a bad side to that. But I played, and I played ice hockey, which I loved. I played baseball, which I loved. I played football, which I loved. And I had the same experiences. When you're at play, whatever it is, and I'm sure there's people out there who are listening who play tennis, maybe they play bocce ball, or maybe they like to go bowling, or maybe they like to ski, but play does have this ability or power to have you focus only on play and what you're doing. And the feeling of, I don't know, for me, and I think for you, it was probably exhilaration that you were doing something so active and creative, because play is very creative.
Right.
So that was a really good point. And I think that, a lot of people, like I was and am, trapped in my office on the computer all day long and dealing with all of this stuff. I have failed to do what I used to do that made me feel that way, and that is play, that is run, and that is just to get out in nature. And I think that's what we need to do. You mentioned something here. Um, what are we here for? If it isn't to enjoy all of the gifts that the Creator has given us, and it's nature, it's experience, it's love, it's all kinds of emotions, but it isn't just about dealing with war and misery and heartbreak. But what are we here for? What is it that makes us human? I want to come back to that in a minute. Um, but you mentioned a couple of other things that I have to mention. Um, Poetry. Russia, maybe unlike any other country in the world, is so dedicated to, devoted to their poets and authors like Pushkin and Chekhov and Tolstoy. I never experienced that in the United States. And like you, I had a liberal arts education, but my education in terms of literature and art was not very good. You know, we would have to read a poet and something that he or she wrote, and then we were told to analyze it. And you know, we got corrected on whether we had the right interpretation or not. And and as I'm now older, I thought how foolish that was. And you know, we would do a poet a day, and then the next day we'd be on to another one, and never really be able to read much of any of these poets' other works, except maybe selections from maybe Shakespeare, who we never understood, maybe Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Uh, you know, it didn't matter who it was, but we didn't go deeply into these people. And now I realize that we went about it the wrong way. Why not just read it and just think about it and be quiet in the classroom and not say anything? You know, and then okay, a bunch of guys sitting around reading a poem. Then when it's over, not the teacher giving a test, but the guys talking about it amongst themselves. You know, there was a great movie, one of Robin Williams' best, The Dead Poets Society. And that was all about poetry. And the boys in
Yes.
this prep school, much like I went to, by the way, who would sneak away and read poetry. And it inspired them and it got them to be stronger, be more aware, and eventually to get in trouble. And one of them ended up committing suicide because his father refused to let him be in a play, and be an actor or a poet. And I think that was symbolic of what goes on in society. We're told that being a poet or being an artist or being a writer or a thinker, you're not going to get ahead this way. The way you get ahead is you get ahead in business, and you've got to have that kind of an education. And I think you were very fortunate, and much more fortunate than I was, although I feel I was very fortunate, um, to experience those things. And I don't want to linger at all on how education has undermined all of us, and including here in Russia. The Russians are very critical of how education is not what it was during the Soviet era. It's really dumbing students down, taking a test, and doing something that'll make you a lot of money. And Ed, doesn't this just go against our basic humanity? What society is telling us what is right and what is good to be successful, to get ahead, and to be rich? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that Yeah, the to get ahead is a good term, isn't it? Get ahead, as if all you were was ahead, uh, and the rest of your body didn't exist. So get ahead, and get a pot of gold as a result. Um, you mentioned Shakespeare, and Shakespeare, of course, said that all the world's a stage and men and women merely players. So now we're back to playing, aren't we? And there are different ways of playing. You can play tennis or basketball or baseball, but you are a player no matter what you do in life, a player being an actor. And, there are ways of acting and ways of acting. And there are genuine actors. And then there are actors who are imitating actors. And they're just imitations. They're not really, they turn on the tube, they turn on the computer, they go to social media and they try to imitate. And the great artists, the great poets I love the Russian poets, the writers, Tolstoy and Chekhov. Uh, I was in a bookstore yesterday, briefly, a used bookstore in town here, and there was a book. I know the woman who runs the bookstore, and it's a little independent store, very good, well-stocked bookstore, all used. And there was a little book, the notebooks of Chekhov, and I just opened it, and it's just brief notations from his notebooks, and it said something. I'm paraphrasing now. The more refined a person, the more unhappy they are. And of course, Chekhov was this, great writer, especially short story writer, a doctor, a physician as well, an important writer in Russian culture. But all of those, as you say, I mean, the Russian poets are so important, and the writers in Tolstoy. And gosh, I read that stuff all the time, all the time. But I read international poetry. I just, without a poem every day, I don't know. It's my vitamin, I guess. But it is so filled with life. But I think this concept of play is very, very important on so many levels. We're all players. And, in a way, it's all a big show, a big game. But not that it's all phony. I don't mean that. A lot of it is. A lot of conventional life is a lot of BS. Uh, and that movie you mentioned, Dead Poets Society, is just a fabulous, fabulous film about trying to teach young people to be alive, to have passion, to not sit like a vegetable and to imitate, and just get up and live your life. Read the poets, read what they have to say. They're inspirational. Listen to the music, listen to this song. That's why I put 3 songs into that essay that I wrote. One by Bob Dylan, and you can click on them and listen to them. One by what's her name? I forget her name now. It's about the how time goes around and the merry-go-round goes around, and then finally the Irish singer. The names escape me so often now. But music, what I don't know how people live without music. I just don't. I don't get it. Poetry, music, art. Oh, just so wonderful.
Yeah. I love
Joni Mitchell. That's who it is.
Joni Mitchell.
Singers.
Yeah.
Yeah, Joni Mitchell. Yeah.
Yeah. I have the same problem. I think as as we get older, and it's not dementia, it's not the onset of Alzheimer's or anything. It's just
No.
that the hard drive just is so loaded and full, and it's slowing down. There's so much there, and I'm just like you. You know, I'll try to remember a name, and I used to be really good at names. And when I was a high school teacher. I knew every kid in the school just about by name. I had a business, a consulting business, and I'd be working with an organization and 100 people at a time, and eventually I'd know all their names. And today, I I'm having a hard time with names as well.
Yeah,
Nevertheless,
I've never been good with names, and I'm
you
not
talk
good now.
you talk about being a player, and I'm not talking about sports now. A player in life, and that begs the question: who am I as this player? What what is my role? What is my purpose? And um, that's a question I don't know whether when you get older like we are, you start to wonder and question, well, who am I? I think you know who you are. You've known who you are for a long time. I thought I knew who I was at two or three different times in my life. I thought I knew. I was comfortable with it. Uh, but I I have to go back to the experience that I had in making my film, The Ghost of Jeju, when I
Great
went to,
film.
thank you, I went to Jeju Island on the southern coast of South Korea. And the experience there uh, not only radicalized me in terms of the United States government's foreign policy and its actions all over the world, but I said in the film, going there and the experience I had, I found my voice. And it then became important for me to use that voice. And I realized that in making that film, I was expressing my voice. And in and that experience has put my life on a different trajectory, changed my life. I made another film, 30 Seconds to Midnight, and there was another experience of I found my voice. I was saying things in ways that hadn't been said before. And then that led me to make my third film, Who Are These Russians and Why Do We Hate Them, which is a historical documentary. But again, I felt that I had found my voice. And in the 3 years that I've been here now, living here, uh, I believe that my purpose is to try to stay in the moment, try to appreciate the beauty that's around me. And you can see it behind me. That's the town of city of Yalta in the Black Sea. Uh, and to realize that at least now at this point in my life, it's to speak because I have something to say. I'm comfortable with that. Um, and I think you have had this experience pretty much your entire life, which I think is really incredible and is not common. Uh, I think most people think that they're playing Monopoly. That's the game of life for most people in the Western consumer society. Um, I want to. I don't want to shift gears. I want to go off onto another topic, and it's about our humanity. And I don't know if you feel like I do, but I feel that so many things that have occurred just in our lifetime, Ed, um, have served to deprive us of what's human, deprive us of our humanity. We become like cattle or sheep, and we're herded, and we're we're made to believe, and we're taught to believe that this is the way we should be, and this is the way the world is. And you know, I don't care if it was washing machines or television sets. microwave ovens, or today, this electronic media that consumes the life of most people, and the cell phone. Um, and now they're talking about artificial intelligence. Well, even robots. I was having a conversation with a friend just yesterday about robots. Oh, they're really good. They're great. For whom? They've taken away millions and millions of jobs. They've made a small group of people incredibly rich. And basically, they turned us into slaves, serfs. You'll have nothing and you'll be happy. Oh, really? And so I'd like your thoughts on what's been happening in the world that is depriving us of and denying what makes us human.
Well, a lot of it has to do with what you just mentioned, with technology and the development of technology over the last 60 years. Uh, I remember when I was young, there was a limited amount of technology. There was a home phone, there was a radio, there was a limited number of TV stations, and there was that's more or less what there was. And if you were a kid or even an adult, you didn't spend a lot of time with the technology. You were outdoors, or you went to work. If you were an adult, you went to school. If you were a kid, and you played outside, and you had time to be bored. And boredom is such an important experience for everyone, because it's only by being bored that you can. Walter Benjamin, who is a famous writer in the early days of the 20th century, wrote a little essay called The Storyteller. And he referred to boredom as again, I'm trying to remember the phrase he used, but it's kind of like the egg that hatches the imagination and the spirit to the larger world. And so you need silence, you need quiet, you need to be in nature, and just to be, so to speak. As you said, to sit on a bench looking out at the sea, and just being there, not doing, but being, and being quiet and listening, and not trying to achieve anything, just being at home in the world. And so I think that the technology has been very, very destructive. The cell phone is a particularly nasty little device. And of course, artificial intelligence is, in my opinion, just something for really insane people. But it's here, and we have to try to understand it and deal with it. I remember a few years ago when I was still teaching, the college where I was teaching at, it's about like 7 years ago, had a guy, I'm trying to remember his name, this guy who's known for what's called the singularity. This is when artificial intelligence and the technology will become smarter than human beings. I forget the guy's name at the moment. So the college where I was teaching had him come and speak, and they paid him like $50-something thousand to speak to the students. And this is a guy, and your viewers could look him up, the singularity, and you'd find his name. He takes like 200 vitamins a day. because he is trying to live forever, be immortal. And there's a whole bunch of these billionaires who are tied into the high-tech industry, to AI, who think they're going to live forever. And so at the heart of all this technology and these changes, this is what I've seen over the course of my lifetime, is this tremendous denial of death and denial of the human body, as if the body is a machine, the mind is a machine, and there's no such thing as the human spirit, and we're not made of flesh and blood, and we don't actually die. And you could take enough pills and use enough technology to maybe download yourself into a computer at some point. And it's all part of a development that is really very sick, very sick. And that's where we're at. And the technology has a lot to do with the wars now, too, of course. So I see that as a very nefarious development. And then people would say, well, you know, you're in your 70s and blah, blah, blah. And so, you know, you just think the good old days, you know, when you had your typewriter, which I still have, manual typewriter. But, you know, you're just nostalgic for the past. No, I'm nostalgic for the future. For the future, not the past. And I just don't see this technology is going to bring us anywhere good. And of course, the ultimate technology, it's nuclear weapons. And if they go off, and the US and UK, and they're pushing in Russia, if they go off, then I guess, you know, we won't die. We'll all just be dead. And there's something very evil about all of this.
You mentioned again more things than I could write down. You talked about boredom and how important that is. And I can remember as a Catholic growing up, just like you did, in a very strong Catholic environment in central Maine, French Canadian. The nuns used to tell us, an idle mind is the devil's workshop. I don't know if you ever heard that.
Oh, I heard.
Really? That is so counter what we've been talking about. We're talking about having an idle mind, about meditating, about not thinking about anything, and just being. I loved how you put that. Just being and not doing. And being is more than just trying to get ahead. Being is more than just being on the treadmill. Being is more than just saving to consume and to go in debt to buy and get more things that make me supposedly happy. You talked about AI and robots. My friend yesterday showed me a video. Jeez, you can't believe this stuff. I think it was made in China, and there were two robots, a man and a woman, looked just like humans, who were dancing. And it was, you looked at this and you said, no, that they were two robots. And so I said, why? I asked myself the question, why? What's the purpose of this? Who really is going to appreciate that? Obviously, the people who watch it see it as entertainment, and they don't think about maybe why, what's the meaning of this, and where it's going. Anyway, I've done a couple of shows with some really bright people. A woman, a professor in Greece. We've done several shows on transhumanism, and that this is what is happening today in the world. You know, this Klaus Schwab and his World Economic Forum group that's captivated the minds, the souls, and the hearts of so many leaders in many countries, including our own, where you will have nothing and you will be happy. this is the new world order, and
Yes.
it's reducing the population of the planet to that golden billion, as they talk about it, a billion people
Yeah.
all striving for the same thing. And what you mentioned was everlasting eternal life, that no dying, uh, you will have everything if you participate is. And what this is doing, it is destroying our humanity. It's what people are calling now transhumanism. It's the
Right.
next evolution of what it means to be human. And when I look at this, if they succeed, we will be worse off than serfs, than slaves. We will have what? Nothing much to live for. In fact, their goal is to eliminate 7 billion of us, people who are not like them and don't aspire to what they aspire to. And don't you think that we talked about um, technology, but in recent years, I've been very troubled by the thought and the belief that we have to make progress. That's what it means to be human, and to make progress, to find new and better ways to make stuff, to make it cheaper, to be able to run faster, jump higher, uh, and throw further. They call that progress. And I have to wonder, where's all this progress headed? And what has it gotten us right now? It's gotten us into this world that you're describing, that I'm trying to describe, where we are now, that is really not what it is to be human. Um, Ed, um, your final thoughts on what it is that we need to be encouraged to do more of to escape the feelings of anxiety, isolation, and fear. And you mentioned something else very important, the fear of death. Uh, your thoughts?
Well, I'm no exemplar of anything. I'm just, one person, one guy. I don't hold myself up as some guru on all this kind of stuff. But I think that what's essential is, to fight the Klaus Schwabs of the world, to fight the world economic uh, groups. One of the things they're always pushing for is more and more technology, as if technology is so-called progress. The more tech, the more progress. They're almost equivalent, right? Technology, progress, robots, AI, and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things as individuals we can do for our own enjoyment of life and for our own spiritual and social salvation is to turn these devices off, to go outside, to be silent, to be in nature, to have conversations. Uh, I wrote a little facetious article that sometimes I reprint on Labor Day here in the United States. Labor Day is early September, as you know, in the United States. And it's called a Do Nothing Day. Rather than, a Labor Day, let's have a Do Nothing Day. Or actually, let's have a couple of weeks of doing nothing. But to do nothing in this frenetic environment is almost equivalent to killing someone, because you're not doing anything. You have to always keep busy, 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 busy beavers, just like the nuns, the French Canadian nuns told you. Of course, I've heard that many times too. Idleness is the devil's workshop. It goes back, I think, to Benjamin Franklin as well. I think the nuns were imitating Benjamin Franklin. I don't know. But the devil will sneak in and get you. Well, maybe we need a little bit more of that kind of devil may care attitude, and just kind of chill out, so to speak, or cool it, or take it easy. I think the world would be a lot better off if we stopped doing a lot of the things we do and just try to enjoy life. And again, I say this not to the exclusion of protest and politics, and that's absolutely essential. I think I've told you before, one of my favorite authors is Albert Camus. And Albert Camus, who considered himself an artist, he said, my job in life is to serve both beauty and suffering. Beauty and suffering. They're not mutually exclusive. Sometimes they feel like they are. If you're in a war zone and the bullets are flying over your head, you don't have too much time for beauty. That's for sure. But if you're lucky enough, to not be in that situation, you can serve both, and you can fight against the bullets and the bombs and all of the poverty and all the bad stuff that's happening in the world. But we need both. That's what I think.
I appreciate that thought, that it isn't all about being silent, turning inward, and meditating. We cannot escape from confronting the world we live in. And you mentioned protesting against the violence, which dehumanizes us, protesting against all kinds of other laws and ways of thinking is really important. It's important for people to speak out and to express their thoughts and their feelings. And that basically was the title of this article that you wrote yesterday, is There Is No Escape from Telling. I'm going to put that link in the description to the show. I'm also going to make reference to that wonderful book that you wrote, a collection of essays for many, many years. I hope I get this right this time. Searching for Truth in an Empire of Lies.
Country
of Lies. I do it every time. Searching for Truth in a Country of Lies. An amazing book. They can get it at Amazon. And it's just a wonderful read. We've done I don't know how many shows now on some of the chapters in that book. And one of the things that I'm looking forward to discussing with you is Robert Kennedy Jr., Bobby Jr., announced that he's running for president. We've had some email correspondence back and forth about that, but you told me you were a good friend of his and that he had phoned you after giving his announcement speech in Boston. And so you have some great insight into this man, into his ability, his intellect, and his nature. And I look forward to discussing this with you as we move along. He wants to be president. That's a very steep hill to climb. He's running against some powerful forces, but I'm going to want you to share your insights, not only into the man, but into this very, very steep challenge that he's facing. Ed, I can't thank you enough. You've been a real gift to me, and I think a gift to others. Some of the comments from a number of people have been very positive about the discussions that we've had. Really a departure from just rehashing and speculating and analyzing, what the heck is going on here in Ukraine between the United States and Russia. So thank you so much. We'll look forward to another wonderful and deep and probing conversation in the future.
Thank you very much, Regis. It's mutual. It's all about relationships.
Yeah, and all about telling.